Knudsen.
What's up, Tursky?
This is Two Guys Talking Golf.
What's going on, man?
We got an episode today.
I got something definitely very interesting. Very interesting to talk about.
It's either going to be the worst episode ever or people are going to love it. But basically, we're going to deep dive into a couple different topics. It's going to be a lot of like us reading and us going through photos. So this might be easier to listen to if you're watching it on YouTube, so you kind of know what's going on. Or maybe it comes across on a podcast. I mean, we'll try to keep everyone involved on what exactly we're talking about the whole time. But we have a couple different topics because Sanderson Farms, really not a lot going on equipment-wise. I know Kevin Streelman was testing out a new Wilson putter. I don't know if you saw that.
Did I catch that this week? I might have.
That's it. That's probably a no. You could just say no. I'm
trying to think if I did.
That's okay. It's definitely right up your alley, though.
No, I mean the funny thing is, I was in the forums this week a little bit. I was up there churning it up a little bit with some of the members, talking about a few things. So I'm just trying to remember if I did see it. But
what were you talking about there in the forums? What were you mixing up?
I mean, it wasn't necessarily mixing anything up, but like the new PXG blades are out. That new Mez putter, the new Lab putter came out. So jumping in there, chatting with some people just about those type things. And then what was there was one other topic that I jumped in there to talk about. I don't remember what it was, but jumped in. Gave the people a little something,
Man
for
the people.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, actually, I just pulled it back up to see. It's definitely a putter that's at my alley, that Wilson putter. I don't know if you have more details on it. There's a few observations I
don't have details. It's just my observations are probably similar to your observations, but it caught my eye because it's obviously a fanged mallet. I feel like you've kind of always drifted towards the number 7 style.
Typically.
Second, it definitely is a number 7 style. Obvious influence. I believe Odyssey had the first fanged mallet, but even that I'm not necessarily positive on.
True.
Scotty's also had a number of them. Pretty much every putter company now at this point has a fanged mallet. I always attributed it, the original design at least, to Odyssey, but either way, it has that fang shape, the Wilson. I thought it was kind of a smart shape. I mean, you could see that it's built up almost like an Answer style, like the bumpers, the heel-toe bumpers on each side. I think probably gives it a little more stability, I bet, on off-center hits. And then the sole, when I first saw it, I didn't see the branding on the inside, and I was like, oh, wait, is that an Odyssey putter?
Yeah.
Because the weights are the same.
Yeah.
The sole weights look exactly the same as this putter, but for Odyssey. And they use it in a bunch of different putters, but it's those interchangeable sole weights with the spokes coming out of them. Definitely has just a general Odyssey influence. It looked like Streelman was testing it with the 2 thumbs grip, which is interesting. I mean, I've never actually tested with it, but they have them at PGA Tour events a lot because a couple of the guys use that 2 thumbs grip, so they'll have it around one of the stand bags, and I'll pick it up occasionally, and I'm like, this makes sense. You have your thumbs on opposing sides, so it kind of anchors those in a little bit. So those were all my thoughts about the Wilson putter. Unfortunately, I have no tech design or any quotes from Wilson on that. I was not out there in Mississippi this week, but I can stop talking now and you can give your thoughts.
No, I mean, a lot of it is exactly what you said. I mean, the bumper thing was pretty interesting. I didn't really think about that. Or most number 7 style or fang putters, wing putters, whatever you want to call them. Mm-hmm. They're a little more flowy around that section as you go from face down to the fang. They're either a little more rounded or curved. It's not as sharp. And you're right, these definitely have some steps, much like a traditional putter. The fangs definitely seem a little longer than a traditional number 7. Like an Odyssey 7, which you kind of, like you said, that was kind of the first one that gained a ton of popularity. And I think it got so popular because there was so many guys on tour using it. It was like everybody on tour was using that putter. But the fangs definitely look long on this. compared to, and maybe it's shorter heel to toe to make those look longer, but they definitely visually look a little longer than a traditional number 7. And then the other thing, like you said, with the weights is the first thing I kind of noticed that you hit that picture and the sole is basically just all milled. It says staff model TM22, and that's it. And then it's Odyssey weights. But I do have to say the Odyssey weights in the photo don't look as flush as they do sit in like Odyssey heads. They almost look like they're still poking out of the bottom of the sole by just maybe a tiny, tiny bit. So the fit, I'm going to go and say this is a total prototype. And the fit of those weights is not 100%. Now those weights are like they're famous for being Odyssey. I think you can buy them on like not necessarily Odyssey, like they're not Odyssey branded. I think you can buy those weights like elsewhere, and they're a little generic. But no, overall, I mean, I think it's a good looking putter. Same with you. I've never messed with the 2-thumb grip. I've seen them before. I've never actually even held one, I don't believe. But like you said, the interesting, 2 thumbs on it, it does kind of make sense. I bet it takes some of the wrist action out of the stroke. And but it is a very short heel to toe putter. It's kind of stubby from heel to toe, which is interesting. It
does look really short heel to toe, a little stubby. Yeah, it does.
Little stubby boy.
Good call.
But overall, like I said, I think it's a solid looking putter. It's fully milled. There's no insert, anything. I mean, when you click on it, it's got a kind of a shallow mill on the face. So I mean, the sole too, you can see the milling marks if you're in the forum and you're looking at the photos and you click on them, they get a little bit bigger, and you can actually see the milling marks across the bottom. So I mean, 100% milled, little slant neck. But yeah, overall, I think Wilson did a good job on it. I think it's a really good putter. If it does come to market, I think if it's the right price, I think it'll sell. They'll sell some units.
Here's what I think is going on. Now that you say that, all those talking points, well said, by the way. Now that I think about it, it probably is a one-off prototype. They're trying to get a Wilson-made putter into the bag of Streelman, so they're going to, go back and forth on a million different prototypes. He's going to finally get something that he actually wants. Then, eventually, they're going to come out with that putter to retail. And that'll be their tour model putter, and then they'll round out the lineup with 3 different head styles. Now, I don't know if that's what they're doing, but if they were doing that, I think that's the smartest thing ever. I think companies like that should be doing that. Attach the style of putter to your biggest name out there who's willing to put in a prototype, then bring it to market. I think that's a really smart strategy, and I think we're kind of getting a look at what that strategy looks like in real time. Because you saying that you could just buy those Odyssey-looking weights, maybe they're not Odyssey, that they're just available, makes me think that they're all right, we're not going to come up with our own putter sole weights, because we don't know if he actually even wants sole weights in the bottom of his putter, but he's thinking about a design like this, so we're just going to use those weights, put them in there, it's a prototype anyway. We don't have to come up with our own parts for it. We'll just kind of Band-Aid fix it. We'll get it in his hands. He'll do some testing on the PGA Tour, see if he likes it. Then we'll get the feedback from it, and we're going to inch closer and closer and closer to exactly what he wants and the production model.
Yeah,
I guarantee it's something like that along those lines. And again, I haven't talked to anyone from Wilson. If they're listening and they're oh, he knows, he's just saying that, that he doesn't. It's no, I really don't know. I just think that strategy works. And I think we've seen it work in the past. I think this is what Cobra was trying to do with the Rev 33s, prototype, get something where he's happy, put it in play, then sell it. It's just with those, he ended up going away from blades. In general. They worked so hard on getting those blades, and they killed it. I mean, they made them look really cool. I'm sure they got to exactly what Ricky wanted, but his swing kind of just fell apart.
Yeah. I mean,
with the blades, and his confidence got a little bit lost, and we see where he's at now, and he's playing better, and, I'm sure if they did something similar down the road, it still works. I think that style of marketing and branding and finding retail product involving the pros, I think that's really smart.
No, I agree with you. I think it's actually a very good idea, and I think, the way to go about it to get it that way is probably that way. But the only thing I have is, and this is going to sound horrible, but why wouldn't you do that with Gary Woodland?
What's that?
So why wouldn't you do that with Gary Woodland? He's arguably the biggest name in the Wilson stable. Oh, not arguably, he is. And I have nothing against Kevin Streelman. He's probably a very nice man, but, I don't think anybody walks into a shop asking what Kevin Streelman is playing.
Wow. So now we have beef with Kevin Streelman? Like, how did that happen?
But, nobody walks into a shop and asks, what putter does he have in the bag? But with Gary Woodland, with a big change, maybe they do ask him. He gets a win, something like that. Somebody may walk in and ask, hey, what's Gary Woodland got in the bag, or what's he putting with, or whatever. So I do believe, and that there's the Ricky part of it. Ricky's a huge, even playing poorly is a huge name and a huge draw, and people want to know what he's playing. But no, the Wilson stuff, and I think Wilson is a totally underrated company for the most part. I think they make a really good forged iron that nobody, if you don't know about it, you don't know, but it's really good. Their wedges are solid. Even some of their less expensive putters that are still milled, have milled faces and stuff like that, are pretty decent, value out there. So, and then the woods, we'll see, especially if some of these, these latest ones that you and Greg spotted on tour, arrive in retail. Wilson makes some good stuff. It's just a matter of people giving them a shot.
Yeah, just to your point about Gary Woodland, it's also you have to get the player on board.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure they approached Gary at some point, trying to get him in a Wilson prototype driver, trying to get him in a Wilson prototype putter. But it's also, like, you can't make the player get involved with that, even if he's on staff. Like, they have things in their contract about minimum clubs and, whatever else they have written into their contracts. But at the end of the day, like, if he's playing the minimum amount of clubs from Wilson and he doesn't really want to touch the putter, like, he's been playing a Scotty. He plays with the Scotty. So Wilson has to prove to him that they're going to make a putter that's equal or better than his Scotty so that he feels super comfortable. And, like, that could be a tough process. Because it's like,
sure.
What do you want from your putter, Gary? And Gary's like, I want my putter. It's like, well, we can remake exactly your putter. Would you be willing to try? And it's like, just depends on their answer. If he's not willing to try and he's not giving it, like, the real chance and whatever it's going to take in terms of materials or milling or getting sound and feel properties right, if that's too expensive for Wilson and they don't feel like they're going to get the return, maybe it's just mutually like, all right, I guess Gary is not our guy to get in, like, a prototype putter. But maybe Streelman is. Like, Streelman, his equipment knowledge is very precise in terms of what he wants, and he knows he keeps up with all the different equipment. Like, he's constantly testing, especially with putters. He's testing and testing and testing, so he has a very keen eye. Like, Wilson might see that as a benefit to them. Like, if they're really trying to get the coolest, best feeling, best sounding, most effective putter, maybe they want to work with Streelman. It's like, listen, we'll take all the time with you that you want. Whatever changes you want to see, we're going to make. And we're capable of making what you want, and we're going to spend the time because we want to come up with a great putter.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's all hypothetical, but, like, I could see that happening, and that probably does happen with companies, especially smaller type companies. It's getting these guys' ear and getting them, like, believing in the vision. Because if they don't, if they're just like, listen, I don't know too much about putters, but, like, this putter feels good and this putter doesn't, it's tough to get through to a guy like that and really find any benefit in the design process.
Yeah. No, you're right. There's certain guys who probably, like you said, who have that keen eye of the knowledge, who, really dive into the equipment, who are willing to try other things, because some guys, they get something they like, and unless you make them the exact copy, they're not going to try it. Where Streelman may look at it and say, yeah, I'd love to try a blade. Yeah, I'd love to try this or whatever. And then give feedback, and he could be a great resource to develop new products from. The flip side of it is, if you're Wilson, how much do you devote to that development when, you look at how many putters you're going to sell, especially if they're like a high-end Scotty type, fully milled, all that putter. what's your profit margin on those, and what are you going to have to sell them at? How many are you going to have to sell? And Wilson's not known for making high-end milled putters, so how far down the rabbit hole do you go before you go, man, we're never going to make the money back on these? But
that's what I'm saying. And it's like they probably had that internal conversation, and it was like, well, should we come up with new weights for this sole, or should we get the Odyssey ones?
Well,
I'm not saying that's what they did. It's just that's what it looks like. And this is all a hypothetical conversation anyway.
Yeah,
but it's interesting
100%.
to have. I like thinking about all this behind the scenes, like how stuff gets designed and how it really happens. So when we see a guy like bring a completely new putter out to the putting green and it looks like a prototype and it looks like this is what they're doing, it's kind of exciting for me to see, like, all right, this was basically the first, maybe not the first, but the first rendition that we're seeing out on tour. Like, what'd they come up with, and why, and how. I like finding out all that stuff, but with prototypes, they're probably not going to tell you everything that's going on and what they're thinking about. It is still a competitive game on the market, and they don't want the competitors knowing what's going on, I'm sure. But
no, they don't. I mean,
we're off the rails already. We weren't even going to really talk about this topic, but here we are. All right.
Yep.
So the two things that I wanted to get through today. Recently, we put out a video entitled "Every Driver That Tiger Woods Has Played Since 2012."
Yep.
It's now an article on GolfWRX.com. It's on our Instagram at GolfWRX, on our TikTok at GolfWRX, and on our YouTube channel. So basically, my process for doing this video was go back through every single what's in the bag that Greg Moore shot with Tiger and go through all the in-hand photos and figure out what shaft, loft, head he was playing during each year that we took photos. Because since 2012, Greg has got what's in the bag photos of Tiger every single year.
Yeah.
Which is pretty impressive. Goes to show how long Greg's been out there doing it, grinding out there, getting photos. And it's just really cool seeing the progression of Tiger Woods' driver, like the technology he decides to use. Now, surely he was probably playing some prototypes along the way. And also the shafts that he chooses to use, which I know you're probably jacked up for the most, the shaft part. So we figured that we just go through each year, each driver, like tell me your history with the driver, what you remember about using it, trying it, maybe something Tiger did with the club, talk about his shaft, and just move through year by year and kind of look at Greg's photos.
Yeah.
And retell some of our stories.
It's pretty amazing to think that, he's taken pictures of his clubs for 10 years. But it is pretty interesting that, like, you go to, like, 2012 and the in-hands aren't quite as intimate as they are now. Like, I mean, even 10 years ago, Greg was still trying to build that relationship with Joe and Tiger to be able to really handle, his clubs. And, the photos we have are a little farther away. They're not quite, right up close. But like you said, I mean, 10 years of just taking photos of Tiger's bags is just wild to think about. Like, I mean, 2012 seems like it's miles away, and it's only 10 years ago. So
I know.
But it is pretty cool. I mean, you start off with the first year, and you're going basically the Nike VR, which I think his was like, wasn't his a VR like limited or something like that? But it's Nike VR.
I'm assuming that all his Nike drivers were some sort of limited prototype, something going on internally, or just a lot of hot melt. Now, I don't want this to turn into like a Nike bashing segment, because I think we've done that on this show before, and I think the listeners probably know where we stand. But in my testing, my personal experience with Nike drivers, they were never the best fit for me in terms of getting the best numbers. They weren't winning, the launch monitor offs. I don't know. I think most people probably agree with me or know what I'm saying. The sound was always kind of an issue, and I felt like they always either spun way too much or were like wildly unforgiving. But
yeah,
I also know that there's been a couple Nike driver releases where people get into a driver like that and they won't change for 10 years because there's just something about it that's special and different. It feels good, performs good. So I guess what I'm saying is Nike's always been hit or miss, but Tiger's always kind of played a Nike driver throughout that era, and he didn't seem to have any serious issues with it other than missing every fairway for like 3 years and still winning every event. But I think he was just kind of erratic off the tee, so I won't put that on Nike. But anyway, yes, he was playing the VR and with like an asterisk on all the Nike drivers, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean the VR Pro, and I think it was like the VR Pro Limited or something like that. Like they actually, I think they made like a number, or a number of them that you could actually buy that were like really his. But it had that like that compression chamber. So if you're trying to picture it like online, if you're listening, it had kind of a really dark black or really dark navy blue top. And then on the bottom was silver, and then it had the red compression channel right after the face. So if you hit stuff low on the face, it would kind of compress. I do have to say, this driver here, I was never good enough to really play it. It was kind of demanding, but the shape of it was pretty awesome. It was super old school and traditional, kind of that pear shape where the heel kind of flares out a little bit, a little more weight, looks like it moves towards the toe. But just the shaping of it, I remember, was really good. And I think it had a fairly deep face on it. From what I remember on it. But the big thing with this one, I remember 2012, he was playing the Graphite Design Tour AD DI, so the orange and
orange one.
The orange and white shaft. Like,
I just call it the orange one, like quote unquote the orange one.
Yep.
I think it deserves that respect.
And it might have been, I don't know if it was 12 or it was 13, but I got the shaft right kind of after he'd been playing it for a while, and I remember I just got paired up with some random guy at a course, and I was hitting that, and he goes, "Hey, that's the Tiger shaft." Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Okay, it's the Tiger shaft. It's orange and whatever." But that driver, I remember some of these I hit like at like demo days, because when I was doing like Callaway demo days, you'd have a slow day, you'd walk down and see what the boys at TaylorMade were doing, see what the boys at Nike were doing, and hit each other's stuff and see who has the coolest shafts in their arsenal and all that. So I hit a few balls of this thing on the ranges, but I never played with it out on the course or anything like that, but I do remember the shape being just awesome. And that big red compression channel just stood out when it sat in the bags.
Yeah, I remember this looking great from address and then hitting it, and then that was about that. But the DI, the orange DI, like Tiger's probably, maybe not even subconsciously, like just consciously, the reason why I still have the DI in my mini driver. Like that was such an impactful and recognizable shaft, like that orange DI. Two-tone white up top and then transitions into the orange at the bottom, like such an iconic shaft. And you still see it out on tour, like Hideki uses a version of it.
Yeah.
I think, Spieth will be off and on with it. I'm struggling to think about who else plays the orange one. I know there's a lot of like black DIs out there that guys play, but that orange one, man.
Yeah.
And he had that for a while, he had that for years. He was either like a whiteboard or a blue board or the DI, that you associate with Tiger. So that's what sticks out most.
The other interesting thing too, and he plays them for a little longer, but he's still rocking the 100-gram fairway wood shafts in his 3 and 5 wood, 103-gram Diamana S's, the S series, which was basically a blue board.
Savage.
And he rocked 103-gram. So you basically go from a 65-gram driver shaft to a 100-gram 3-wood shaft and a 100-gram 5-wood shaft, which was crazy to think about. But Yeah, the DI was always interesting when you put it in play because it's kind of a little bit of a higher launching shaft. And I guess, through the design of those heads that have compression channels, like big ones like that, I guess they did kind of slightly launch a little lower than a non-compression channel because as the bottom of the face flexed, it would kind of reduce the loft a little bit. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was kind of a higher launching shaft. It was pretty interesting that he was, playing that in that driver head. But like you said, he played it for a long, long time. That was in the bag for a while.
I was a young, impressionable youth when he was playing that shaft as well, so it's something that I always wanted to play with. All right, let's go to 2014. We got the Nike VRS Covert Tour Prototype. I believe. That's next, right? That's 2014?
That's 13. You said 14, but 13 is the VRS Covert Tour. This is when they moved to that. They moved to the red on top, so the whole crown was that red with the little Nike swoosh in the back. And I don't think his had the swoosh on the crown. I think his was just all red.
Smart.
Because I remember, I want to say
I never liked that swoosh on the crown.
Yeah, and I think there was people coming up to like the dude at Nike at the time who worked there, and were asking if they could get that head with no swoosh on it, and he was like, "No, like we don't make that." And they're like, "Well, they make it for Tiger," and he was like, "Well, that's Tiger." But this is when they moved to that big hollow cavity in the back of the head. So when you flipped it over on the sole, there was a big chunk missing out of it. And I think they said that was for, moving the CG around and all that stuff. They were wildly unforgiving. They were punishing to hit if you weren't able to hit the center of the club face. But again, the shaping was good on them. They were a little more rounded, than the VR in my eyes. But I just remember that thing being wildly hard to hit because, if you didn't strike it dead perfect, it wasn't going where you wanted it to go. And then, back to the old whiteboard 73X, which was a staple of his for a long, long time back in the day. And it's still a shaft what Ricky plays. Right now he plays a prototype whiteboard. So the whiteboard was all over tour back then.
My thing with that huge cavity in the back, did it make sense to pull the CG super far forward to get spin lower? Using that back cavity, it would naturally shift weight more towards the face and low. I guess I understand the concept behind it, but if you want to know whether it worked or not, just look at all the drivers out today. If anything, they're adding protrusions low and back to drive the weight low and back. Even say a driver's built for low spin. They're putting weight all the way up near the face, but they're still having, the curvature of the club extending all the way out to the back, because I think that's key for building MOI and forgiveness. Yeah. And I think that's the part of moving the CG around that Nike wasn't getting right with that, whatever you call it.
Yeah,
what is it? The little cave in the back, I don't know what they were. I don't know what they were referring to it as, but I'm just not sure that it was the best way to go about it. And this is probably better to ask a legitimate, someone in R&D or an engineer for a club company to explain whether it's possible for that to work, because I just don't know. In practice, obviously, it made the drivers really unforgiving, and the whole market's moved away from trying to do stuff like that. So I would say it was that design that wasn't working, and it was something that made the sound not great, but they were nailing it from address. And I think intellectually, they were somewhat ahead of the game in terms of trying to move that CG drastically in different spots. I'm just not sure that was the best way to go about it, for golfers, and especially amateurs who are missing the center of the face way more than a Tiger Woods. Yeah. Maybe not the most forgiving clubs.
No.
At the end of the day, just not very high in forgiveness. They look cool, though. I love the color scheme, especially this one we're talking about. The red and black, and even the red at address, I thought it was a pretty good idea. I never liked the swoosh on the crown, but I liked the cherry red. It was just when when you go to hit it, I don't know. It was just always not better for me than any other driver that I was hitting.
Yeah, it wasn't was it this one or maybe it was the next one? The 3-wood that I think it was a 3-wood that stayed in the bag for a little longer. That he kept that red one in, even when they changed back over.
Yeah, for a couple of years after, I think. They were killing the fairway woods.
Yeah.
You know, obviously we still see Nike fairway woods. It's just with the driver, that design that they were pushing and pushing and pushing, it wasn't working. But the fairway woods, the irons, the wedges, and the putter, and obviously the golf ball, you know, they were killing all that.
Yeah. And then, you know, stay away from driver. Those raw VR Pro Forge wedges that he had were so good.
Ooh.
That's the other thing Nike, I think, didn't get a lot of credit for, but they absolutely nailed. They killed wedges. They made
because
really
Mike
good
Taylor
wedges.
was doing them.
Yeah, and they made great wedges, and they spun like crazy. They didn't really shred the golf balls as hard as some of the, some like the Callaway and Taylormades and stuff. But the shaping on them, to me, always looked phenomenal.
Yep. Completely
I was a big
agree.
fan.
Yeah. Nike great wedges. No surprise Mike Taylor was involved.
Yeah.
So. All right, so what are we on? We're on 2014 now, right?
Yep.
All right, so 2014, he was also playing a Nike VRS Covert Tour. But this was like the 2.0, right?
Yep.
So this, instead of the black in the back, it was white, which definitely gave it a different look. It's got Tour written right in the center of the sole. Basically just the 2.0 version. I can't tell from this photo what the difference was, like what exactly they were trying to do. But it's definitely different. I never hit this one. I don't think this was a retail, was it?
I think
2.0
so.
Tour?
The Tour, I don't know if there was a Tour that came to retail. And if it did, I think it looked a little bit different. No, they did. They made a Tour version, and it had the same black and white, and then the non-Tour version was silver and black.
And this was what, just like 440 cc's or 430, something like that? I would assume
it might have been a little
slightly smaller, built for lower spin and all that, like what Tiger exactly wanted.
Yeah, and then also the Tiger had a part of his, much of his stuff was all prototypes, but I don't know if this is the first one. It might have been the previous Covert that I forgot to mention. It was his is glued, and all the retail ones had the straight fit hosel, which I do have to say the Nike straight fit adapter, it was stupid heavy, and I guess they always had problems engineering around it because it was crazy heavy. Yeah. But having the ability to change, basically change the face angle with a one sleeve and then change the loft with a second sleeve and set it was pretty genius. Like, what they had there was pretty sweet.
They were onto some stuff.
Yeah.
Manipulating the sole so it, not the sole, the hosel, so that they change by themselves, and then just like waiting and doing different things with the crown, like throwing the Nike sign on the crown in a different spot that's not where the alignment aid is, and going with like crazy, even glittery colors on the crown. You look at some of that stuff, that is kind of where the market's at today.
Yep. Yeah. Everything kind of goes back eventually. And then, and actually the funny, that's the VR Pro, which he had the VR Limited, which had the glued hosel. They made it just a standard VR Pro that actually had the straight fit hosel too. It was not glued. So all his Nike days, he never played the adjustable hosels. He always went with a glued. Yeah. And
I think it was one of those things, even because I did talk to him one time, not to like name drop or whatever, but
no big deal. But
I did talk to him one time in person, like for an interview about this subject matter, and he was like, it wasn't until I got with TaylorMade and like around some of those guys that I even started to understand like the benefits and that I should be using adjustability in certain ways. He was just like, this is how it was done. We glued in the hosel. I didn't want extra weight, and I didn't want like basically the confusion. Like, he didn't know enough about it even to be dialed in. Like, that wasn't part of his equipment process, so he kind of saw it as like, all right, that's the new age thing. Like, I'm going to stick with what I've been doing and I know it works type thing. But then when he learned about it and got with Taylormade and understood the concept is when he started going to those adjustable hosels and not just going glue in. But yeah, his whole time at Nike, he's glue in guy.
Yeah. Well, I think the other part, too, is that straight fit hosel, I mean, he's such a looks guy when he has clubs, you know, when he has certain looks. And that straight, that SRT 8, or I think it was, or SRT, but that straight fit hosel was very chunky. And it made the hosel on the club look very big. And I bet he kind of looked at that, too, and said, that's not something I want to look at. I'm good. Give me, you know, you're going to make me the exact driver I need anyway in terms of loft. So it doesn't matter if my driver's adjustable. But the other interesting thing is kind of going backwards in shaft. Like he went back to the blue board for this driver, went back heavy to the 93. Still playing the 103s in the fairway woods, but went back to kind of an old school driver because I'm pretty sure by 2014 there was a handful of other Mitsubishi products out there. There was probably a handful of products from other companies, but going back to the blue board was kind of interesting. I mean, still a phenomenal shaft. Don't get me wrong, but just kind of interesting he stepped back that way with that driver.
All right, so we can move along to 2015. This is where he threw in the Nike Vapor Speed prototype.
Yeah.
And you can see, like, this is the, what do they call it? The Vapor Green? Or
Volt.
Super Electric Greens, like highlighter green.
Volt.
Volt, yeah. Not Vapor, Volt. That's right. You can see, like, in the concavity in the back, like, they put those bars in to make it more stable. I think this was kind of them inching out of that design and realizing they had a problem with stability. And I remember when these came out, I really liked all the shapes, and the performance was definitely getting there, and I think the feel was definitely getting there, but still I was having issues with spin with this. I think by moving that weight probably a little bit too far back at this point, or something was still going on with the design. Maybe CG was too high. They brought it back, but then it was too high. I don't know. I was always spinning these things a little bit too much. But what do you got on Tiger here?
Yeah, I mean the biggest thing of this one, there's two things that stand out about this driver that were awesome. Again, glued hosel, like when the retail ones had straight fits. Didn't have a loft marked on it. It just had his TW logo in bolt, which
so
was just
sick.
I mean, we're talking about a flex. I'm on flex. And when he showed up playing the $1,000 Matrix Ozic TP7 HDE shaft,
the world shut down when we realized he was playing.
Yeah,
I remember that.
That shaft. I mean, that shaft or a version of that, the $1,000 shaft, had been out since like Matrix has been making $1,000 shafts since, gosh, by 2005-ish. Probably before that. They've been making $1,000 the TP7 was always their super high end. So the TP7 HD had, if you cut the butt end off, like took the grip off, you cut the butt end, you would actually see like 16 little sides inside the shaft that ran down it for like stability. And then it had like some crazy boron and some other like wild materials in it. But it was fairly like mid-low launch, pretty mid-low spin. But those things there, I hit one TP7 in my life that a guy I knew had one, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I never hit a TP7 HD, unfortunately.
Me neither.
I just never got my hands on one. But there was like you said, it was a wild time when he switched to that shaft because everybody was like, it almost like validated the $1,000 shafts. But it was pretty cool to see that go in the bag for him, and he kept it for a little while too. It wasn't like a couple weeks and out. Like he kept it for a little while. Yeah,
it wasn't just one event. But correct me if I'm wrong. Around this time, I feel like we were all speculating, just kind of the golf internet in general, and us, and in the WRX forums. Like when he changed into that shaft, I feel like the rumor was that he was about to buy Matrix.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think I remember that. Yeah,
because I think maybe Matrix was like about to file bankruptcy, or they just had. Like something was going on with the Matrix company, and then him playing it, we all took it as like, okay, this is it. He's buying a shaft company. And looking back at it, it was like, why why do we think Tiger was about to buy a shaft company of all things? But I do remember when he switched into that, because before then it had been the DI or some sort of Diamana.
Yep.
So this was
exactly.
like, wait, what? Like, I didn't even know Matrix was on Tiger's radar. And I'm sure that company at that time, Matrix, was going wild. They were like, we made it. It's over. We're going to sell 10 million of these. The price point of the shaft was obviously
outrageous,
a little unrealistic for the general like Tiger Woods fan just to go pick one up. So I don't know what impact it eventually had on Matrix. Obviously, Matrix went on to get bought by LA Golf, right?
Yeah, all their IP,
like,
I think all the intellectual property got bought. I think the company itself, like Matrix, is kind of gone. But yeah, I think LA Golf kind of bought a lot of the intellectual property that they had for the shafts and stuff like that. And it's, in a sense, though, it kind of, like you said, like everybody talking about, like, oh, he's going to like buy a shaft company and what's he going to do? In a sense, like LA Golf kind of became the, we're going to make prototype shafts for Bryson and
my God, that is true.
And Dustin Johnson and all that. Like they ended up becoming kind of a pro-owned shaft company that makes a bunch of prototypes for a bunch of tour players.
Wait, I wonder if that is what was going on then. Maybe they were trying to sell. Maybe they were trying to like work on a deal. Tiger was like, "All right, I'm going to play your best shaft, and in the meantime, we're going to work on like getting a design that's perfect for me, and I'm going to get 17% of this company." Maybe they legitimately were like working on that, but Matrix wasn't able to keep revenues alive to stay open. They get bought by LA Golf, but they were like, "Hey, we got this idea like of working with a pro," and they made it happen. I don't know. So maybe we were all onto something. Maybe Tiger was legitimately looking into being a part owner or something along those lines with Matrix. Because he kept the shaft in for a while, like 8 months, maybe a year.
Most of that year, I think.
But eventually switched out of it and not into Matrix anymore, and that's kind of the last we heard about that from the Tiger camp.
Yeah. And that was kind of the, that was probably the slow end of Matrix. But I tell you what, that year, in 2014, they probably sold more $1,000 shafts than they've ever sold in the company's history because, anything Tiger, he moves the needle, man. And that, people walking in there saying, what shaft is it? And, and buying them. So.
It's nice to be Tiger.
All right. It is very nice to be Tiger.
You didn't have to worry about the retail price. Okay, so 2016 to 2017, so Tiger's like fresh on TaylorMade. Huge news in the industry.
I remember that.
Definitely around that time, we were all trying to figure out what Tiger's going to do. Speaking of like that shaft conversation, we were also all thinking like he was going to buy just a golf manufacturing company. Like, we thought he was either going to buy a brand or start his own. Like, the TGR thing. Wasn't it around this time he started playing those TGR irons, which we eventually found out Mike Taylor was making, but at the time we didn't know. So, driver-wise, he starts to transition and makes the transition into TaylorMade clubs, and he used the M2 2016 for 2016 and 2017. And that was with the Tensei CK Pro White at first, the 70TX. Eventually moved into the orange for a little bit. I believe that was right around like 2017 Masters. It was either 16 or 17 Masters. He was definitely experimenting with the orange. Played that for a little bit. It was just kind of bouncing between the Tensei White and the Tensei Orange, but always with the M2 2016 driver. I think he was driving it really well around this time. Yeah. If I recall correctly, he was hitting more fairways than ever.
Yeah, that was when he. So I remember when they first announced it. I don't know if you were with me, but that was my first year at GolfWRX, my first PGA show. When they announced that he was coming over, I remember running. Running over to the Taylor. Yeah, the TaylorMade booth.
That was me and you.
And running over, and there's just, every person from the golf media is just packed into this little space, and they announced it
live tweeting,
and everybody knew. Yeah, I mean, everybody knew he was going over there because I think we'd seen spy photos of him hitting different drivers and all this stuff. But, yeah, that 2016 M2, the driver was absolutely phenomenal. The fairway woods are like cult classics still. If you can get your hands on a 2016 M2 fairway, they were so good. He played the M1s in his 3 and 5 wood, but the matching M2s to that driver in 2016 were absolutely killer. But that driver was so good. I mean, it really was. It was.
I know.
It was one of those that. And the funny thing about that year, I think it was that year, was all the pros when they went out from TaylorMade that year. I think, for the most part, were playing M1s because that was the flagship, movable weights. That was the big boy. And then, like, by the halfway point to the halfway point of the season, a lot of those guys in M1s were playing the M2. And a lot of guys had switched over. And I don't know necessarily what it was, if it was a spin thing or a launch thing or forgiveness thing or whatever. But that M2 seemed to really, really jump into a lot of bags of guys who were previously playing M1s at the beginning of the year. So, yeah, that driver's still one of those ones, like, if you're building, like, a cheap bag, cheap setup, if you can snag one of those inexpensively, man, it's a good driver.
I was just going to say that. If I have a buddy who is just getting into golf and doesn't really have a budget, but he wants to play a driver, this is one of my go-tos to recommend. Like, if you could find the M2 2016, and I also say the Callaway XR, which I think also came out in 2016, so a hot year for good value on the drivers. Like, try those two, or like a G400 Max. I think the G400 was a killer too. Tell me that came out in 2016 as well. I think that was a little after.
It might have been slightly after, yeah.
But either way, that era of drivers, like, they were killing it. They were very forgiving. You can get them at a great price now. And, yeah, those are just on my list of things that I recommend to, like, budget golfers or new golfers, because I think they're all very forgiving, like, even for highly skilled guys. Obviously, Tiger played it for 2 years, like, really good driver. Yeah. I just think that era has a lot of great value to it, because that was the first of, like, okay, these tech companies are definitely figuring out the relationship between CG, MOI, like materials, carbon fibers in the heads. They have adjustable hosels, like, all that. Like, so they have all that kind of figured out, and they're releasing drivers every year. So it's like the price of these drivers keeps getting knocked down further and further and further. So you could find one of these, I bet, for like $84 online. And it's such a good driver. Obviously, always hit it against your gamer. Like, if you're testing, hit it against the gamer. It's like a cost analysis. Like, how much is this yardage and dispersion worth to me? And then get that dialed in. But if you're just in the market for something that's pretty good, this M2 2016 still holds up, I think.
Oh, yeah. For sure. So, like you said, 2017 plays the same one. But the 2017, he does throw in the TGRs, the TGR blades. So, the custom one-off, like you said, now finding out, built by Mike Taylor. But the TGR blades showed up because that was when everybody was wondering, when is he going to move? He's got TaylorMade almost everything, but he doesn't have TaylorMade irons.
Exactly.
And is he ever going to move into them?
They were in the lab cooking up the TW Phase 1s.
Oh, so that's 2018, and that is second favorite Tiger iron of all time.
Well, let's get into 2018 then.
Yeah, 2018.
2018, so he switched into the Phase 1s 2018? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so at the same time, then, he moved into the Taylormade M3 with a Tensei CK Orange 70TX. Yeah. At least at the time we shot his What's in the Bag in 2018, which was typically at the Farmers. That's like his first stateside start every year on the PGA Tour. Greg has done his What's in the Bag at the Farmers a lot, so I think this was probably his setup at the Farmers, the M3 with the CK Orange 70TX. I think he changed somewhere in that year in 2018. But at the time, this is what he was rocking with.
Yeah.
The weights that he had set up, at least at this time, one notch in the draw position for the back weight, and then the forward weight just right in the center of the club, not forward or back. So just kind of a neutral, slightly draw setup in the M3.
Yeah, and the M3 was super nice. The interesting, or not interesting, but I think a lot of the talk in the forum was about, is he going to play, what was it, the 430 head or the 440 head or the 460 head? 'Cause they still made both back in this M3, and he played the 460 head. And I think a lot of people were shocked. They expected him to play the smaller one and work the ball a little more, but he ended up playing the 460. And the M3 was sneaky good. If you were a good player, it was sneaky good. Or if you took both weights and threw them all the way in the back, it could be a fairly forgiving head. But the M3 was one of those ones that a lot of pros switched over to. I mean, I know Taylormade gets pretty quick adoption rates, but it seemed like the M3 was one of those ones that people jumped on really, really quickly, especially coming from the 2017 M1 and M2 that they didn't really go crazy, switching over. A lot of guys kept that 2016 M2 in the bag. And then to see the M3 and everybody pretty much jump over to it was pretty huge.
So this era of drivers for me, and I could probably just stay out of this conversation going forward. This era, I mean, I was just using the Slider S, and I would give like a brief thought to everything else, and I would like hit it and test it because it was kind of my job to stay aware of new releases and test them out and stuff like that. But I wasn't considering changing that Slider S for real. Like I would test it and be like, okay, yeah, those numbers are all right, but I'm good. Thank you, though.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
I'll be on my way.
I wasn't open-minded to switching. I was open-minded to testing. So I don't have too much experience, honestly, with the M3 or with the M5 that we're about to talk about. Because he did in 2019, he switched to the M5, which also had like the T-track with the dual weights. And he would play around with those weights. Like, he wouldn't make drastic changes too often, but they would be clicks different. Every time I would pick up the driver, or we spot him on Getty Images or whatever the case is. Like, you see the bottom of the sole. He was definitely changing that thing up a little bit. So a far cry from, like, I'm going to set it, it's going to be glued in, and I'm not going to touch it, to he was actually manipulating the CG, and I don't know whether it was him personally doing it, like he was the one cranking and changing weights, or whether it was like Keith Sabarbro at Taylormade or who he was working with at this time, whether they were actually suggesting or making the changes, or whether Tiger was just out on the range at Isleworth and just with a wrench just twisting away, trying different stuff out. I would like to ask him that question at some point, but pretty cool that he was using the adjustable weights how they're supposed to be used. Dial in, get precise, get exactly what you need. And he was taking advantage of that.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember because I remember like that was like the big buzz of kind of like WRX was like almost every tournament you could get your hands on his clubs, or even from like on TV. He'd swing and the club would be in the follow through and people could tell where the weights were. And like you said, it wasn't anything crazy like, all of a sudden, two weights are pushed all the way forward or whatever. It was just they always, not always, but they would just move. He would definitely be adjusting them for whatever's going on. Yeah. The other thing that's wild in the picture, if you look on it, all the T marks that are in the center channel.
I know. Insane.
I mean, are unbelievable. It's like dyed white from his tees, and he just was smashing the center of the club face over and over and over again. And those tees basically left all their paint inside the sliding weight track that goes face to back, which was just awesome. And and this is the one where he puts in the D+, the Diamante D+. He puts that in the bag of 60 TX. He's pretty much rocked that. He rocks this thing for quite a few years.
About 3 years until like the last time that we saw him. Yeah, so he definitely stayed pretty consistent with that D+ limited Diamante shaft, which I'm sure was quite reminiscent to the shafts he was playing throughout the mid 2000s, late 2000s, all through the 2010, 11, and then 12, he was off and on with that shaft. So returning to that was probably nice and familiar for him, and he felt comfortable with that. He stayed with it even when he upgraded to, this is when the Sim came out. The original Sim, he had a 9-degree version. Still with the D Plus Limited shaft, obviously. What do you got on the Sim?
I mean, I think the Sim is kind of, now looking back, kind of, again, one of those sneaky, really good drivers that I've heard people say, well, when the second Sim came out, well, I have the first Sim and I hit it better, or I don't hit it that much different, or whatever. And I think the Sim is one of those drivers that right now, if you have it in your bag, it probably still holds up pretty well. With majority of the drivers that are out there. It's low spin. It's crazy long. Is it a speed injected face where they can kind of control the CT. Forgiveness wise on the Sim compared to Sim Max, okay, the original Sim with the sliding way forward, not maybe the most forgiving driver in the world, but if you're a skilled player, you're a guy that hits it in the center, that is a really long driver. If you're a really high spin player, it's a great driver to have in your bag. And I haven't looked on eBay or anything, but I would be hard pressed to think that they're demanding crazy high prices. I mean, they're probably not free, but I doubt that you're going to be paying, tons and tons of money for them. But a really good head. I played the Sim Max and I hit it really well when that came out. That was my gamer that whole year, and nothing knocked it out.
Yeah, Sim obviously was never my gamer. I hit it and I liked it. Something about the address profile was just so much different than the slider, and I couldn't get past it for some reason. That's my fault, not their fault. The Sim was one of those world beater type drivers. I mean, everyone was playing the Sim.
Yeah,
on tour, in the marketplace. I'm sure that driver killed it for Taylormade. You look now out on tour, even with the Stealth and the way that's gone, which I think has gone pretty well for Taylormade. A lot of upgrades, free agents using the Stealth, it doing well in the marketplace. But even now, guys still play with the Sim driver.
Yeah.
And with the Sim 2, which I think, looking back, I think it was probably somewhat of a miss. Something just happened between the Sim and the Sim 2, the way they were changing weight or profile or something, because the way that driver performed, it seemed was a little bit too left biased, and something didn't look right to a lot of the tour guys. So not a lot of the tour switched into Sim 2, and that probably bled down through the market. But the Sim just stayed alive through that. Guys were still playing the Sim. The Sim was still selling really well. And I don't think Tiger ever upgraded to the Sim 2.
I don't think so either.
I don't remember him ever playing with that. So he must have felt similarly, and he was happy with the Sim. Because he went right from the Sim, so he played that for 2020, most of 2021. Then when he got to I believe the Hero Challenge in 21 is when he switched into the Stealth. It was either there or the PNC father-son. I don't remember exactly, but he switched into the Stealth late 2021, and he played the Sim for essentially 2 years.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was the father-son that he showed up, because that was right shortly after they did the media for it, because media was in November, and then the PNC, I think, is in, December, January, something like that. It's really early.
It's December, and, I think it's the first week in December they play that.
And I think that was the first time, because I think it had just hit the tour the week before. It just hit the tour guys, and everybody was wondering, is he going to show up with the Sim or the Stealth? No, everybody was kind of wondering. And when he pulled the Stealth out, because I think it was one of those telling Greg you need to go find Tiger.
You need to find Tiger right now. I think they actually moved up the tour launch and the USGA and all that, because Tiger liked the driver and he wanted to play it immediately.
Yep. Yeah.
And he was probably yo, I've been playing this Sim for 2 years. I'm ready to move into this. I'm playing. Can I play it? And they're probably yeah, you could play it, Tiger.
Yeah, come on. And honestly, I think it's one of those things where, with the Stealth, it's kind of interesting that, I mean, maybe Tiger, as he's gotten older and all that, I mean, he's become more of a personal guy, a personable guy to, like, media and things like that. But I don't think Nike could have ever gotten him into a driver with a red face. They get the red crown.
I don't know. They got him to play a Sasquatch.
That's true. With the red face, I was shocked that he switched over to it so fast, or like, he didn't have some custom gray or black face or whatever.
He might have liked it.
Full.
He wears red every single Sunday at a tour event. He's obviously made millions and billions of dollars off of the color red. He probably personally loves the color red, and it seems like this driver is almost made for Tiger. It does have, like, the Nike colorway influence. It almost looks like something Nike would have dreamt up back in the day. But it's got all, like, the best tech, and it's got an all-red face. Like, Tiger probably loves this driver.
Yeah, I mean...
And it's called Stealth. I mean, that's a pretty cool name, and it's kind of fitting. Like, he probably likes being stealthy. He named his yacht Privacy.
It's true. I've never really thought of that.
Yeah. If they call the next driver Privacy, then I'm definitely on to something. But, I just think this colorway, like, this is a perfect driver for Tiger. It also makes me just think, imagine if Tiger had the Stealth driver in, like, 01.
Oh, gosh.
Or 2003. Or, like, 97 when he was swinging. Who knows what his swing speed was? It was probably like 130 when he was cruising casually on a par 4.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine how far he would hit the ball and how much better he would be compared to par. And you could say that for literally everyone in the field and every golfer of all time, but it just would have been so interesting putting, like, that technology into his swing speed at the time, just see what would happen.
It would have been crazy.
If I had a time machine, that probably wouldn't be on the list of things I actually do. If I had a time machine, but it would be a quick experiment that I'd want to run. That's a decade worth of Tiger's drivers.
Yeah, and then 2022, same driver head, but he did make the switch later in the year, July, to Fujikura Ventus Black as the shaft. Which
big switch.
I was kind of shocked at. I mean, he played that D Plus Limited for so long that I just figured he'd just keep playing it. And
I wonder what made him even try to test it.
Yeah, that'd be the interesting question to ask. Like, to ask Tiger, like, what made you want to switch? Like, was there something there? But switched over to the Ventus Black 6X, and then unfortunately he hasn't played much just due to injury and all that. So it'll be interesting to see when we see him again playing, what will be in the bag, because there's a very good chance that we could probably see him at the PNC. No idea what TaylorMade's doing in terms of new product. Like, is there going to be product on something new at that point that he could be playing? Is it is he going to show up with the Stealth and play that? I mean, it'll be really interesting to see what he shows up with at the first tournament of the 2023 season, which, like I said, hopefully will be the PNC, him and Charlie, and they're going to be a tough twosome to play against.
I do recall a conversation that I had. I'm not going to say his name because I'm not sure if he wants his name out there. I don't know if it's my place to say his name. But just some information. I was told at one point he was, like, kind of in the inner circle, like the equipment inner circle at some point. And he would say that, like, once per year, whenever he had ample time during an off season, he would dedicate, like, a day or 2 days just to, like, shaft testing and testing, like, new stuff, and just hit everything just to make sure, like, he's not leaving something out on the table. So he would do that once a year. My feeling is that time of year is probably right now. So he might be on a range right now as we speak, just with a launch monitor somewhere in the vicinity, him getting numbers and literally testing every shaft under the sun that other PGA Tour players have vouched for and they play.
Yeah, it's true.
Someone within that camp is going to all the companies, like, send us your best stuff that you think might be good for Tiger. Send it to this address. We'll build it up. Don't worry about it. And he's going to have a session. We'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, it definitely could be something like that. I mean, he just rolls the bat into the range with a staff bag full of shafts and one driver head and just, pounds balls all day. But
that's the picture that I have in my brain of this yearly session that they have.
And
I don't know if they still do it. He was talking about kind of back in the day. I'm going to talk to that source and see if he would like to come on and talk at some point, or maybe we'll do some content with him, something like that in the future. Because he does have the inside scoop. So,
I bet there's some stories to be told, man.
there are. So, but anyway, so that was a decade worth of Tiger.
Yep.
This segment and this podcast would not be possible without the hard work of Greg Moore. So
that's right.
If you like GolfWRX photos and you ever go back through archives, just realize that he was out there grinding, taking all the flights and trips and rental cars and all that to get photos. So compiling it, going back through was really cool, nostalgic. Just seeing, like, sometimes, Tiger was playing that shaft that year. Like, this is what was going on in my golf game, my life at that time. Pretty cool going down memory lane. I hope it jogged a few memories for the listeners or the viewers, whatever you decided to do with this podcast, how you wanted to listen. But it was fun. Thanks for going down memory lane with me. Shout out Tiger.
I always have fun doing stuff like that, and you kind of forget, because you don't necessarily think of Tiger as an equipment kind of junkie, an equipment geek.
Sneaky, though.
But, yeah, it's sneaky how many changes. I mean, over those years, how many changes he made between shafts and heads and all that stuff. He did actually make a lot of changes. I mean, he's no Charles Howell III and changes stuff all the time, but he did make some changes there over those 10 years. So pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, in my mind, I'm always like, Tiger doesn't change anything. He's stubborn.
Yeah.
Like, once he gets some, he just sticks with it for years and years. Going back through, you kind of realize not actually true. I mean, a lot of the things from year to year stayed very consistent, and what he looks for in his 4-iron and his 8-iron and shaft-wise, like his wedge grinds, his putter, those haven't changed, but he was changing things to improve, especially with the driver. Like, he was pretty much always staying on top of the newest technology. He was obviously changing shafts to whether it was a different swing or a different driver or just new technology came out. He was more open-minded looking back than, like, I ever not gave him credit for, but just, like, understood about Tiger.
Yeah.
Is that he really is kind of a gear junkie. He stays on top of stuff, and he is willing to play the newest equipment. He'll even make sole weight changes and adjust his driver, and he was doing more with equipment throughout that time than I think we all give him credit for. So
yeah, I agree.
Tiger Woods, the gearhead. That's what this episode was, really.
That's awesome.
But I did have another, like, segment and a whole nother thing I wanted to do, but I think we're just going to save that for another episode because this took us well over the hour mark. Hey, when it's Tiger Woods, you always got a lot to say. So we could cut it there, and I guess that's somewhat of a teaser, cliffhanger for next episode. Look out for a cool little segment I want to do. But that was this week. Tiger Woods, a decade worth of drivers, and Streelman's Wilson putter and whatever else we talked about with prototypes. That's what happens on this show. We're just two guys, and we talk about golf. And this was Two Guys Talking Golf. See you guys next week.